A year ago, I published a top 10 DIY tips video. Well, a year has gone by, we've all learnt a lot. So here is my brand new top 10 DIY tips video, part 2. In 1889, the commissioner of the US Patent Office said soon we're going to have to reduce our staff because, quote, everything that can be invented has now been invented. That was 1889. Little did he realise what was going to happen over the next 130 years. And inventions and progress are a bit like learning. They're a continuous thing. They don't stop. Just as you think you know all about a certain subject, something pops up that makes you realise that it's never ending, is an ongoing process. So whether you're new to DIY or whether you've been doing it for a few years like I have, there's always something else to learn. So these top 10 tips, part 2, are a combination of things that I've been doing for some time, plus a few of them that I've only just found out and I want to share with you. So let's get stuck in and let's start with cutting a bit of twin and earth. So this is a bit of twin and earth cable, the sort of cable that we use in the UK for both our lighting and our sockets. And it's quite usual if you're going to install this for a new lighting or you're putting another power point in, to have to cut back the insulation to a certain point so you can actually get to the wires and cable the thing in. And there's always that tendency for people wanting to cut the insulation back like this. And look, you can see what I've done already. If you look carefully, even just one small cut, I've actually now exposed the copper. So what you will find is if you do it this way, very quickly you get to a point that although you'll be able to take off the insulation from the outside, what you're left with, if you look carefully, is actually damaged cables. Well, I've now actually cut too far through the insulation, so I've actually compromised the insulation of the internal wires. You can see that one on the blue. And if I just pull this a bit further, you can see the same on the brown as well. So that's not such a good way of doing that. There is actually a better way that's a lot easier. If I just tidy that up, let's start again. And what you need is you need a utility knife, or what I'd call a Stanley knife, and just make a little score down the middle of the insulation, which is where you find the earth cable. If you just peel this away, the earth, which is the one that's not got any insulation on, just pops out like that. Then with a pair of pliers you can grab that and quite easily pull it back, which then exposes the other cables without any possibility that you've damaged them while you've made the cut. With that exposed, all you need to do is cut it off like that. You've now got your exposed wires with absolutely no risk that you've got any damage on the inner insulation, because you've not cut anywhere near it, that you can now terminate onto your lighting circuits or your sockets or whatever you're working on. And this is one of my favourite tips. So the scenario is you've been to IKEA, you bought all your flat packs, you've got it home, you've undone all your bits and pieces, and in the packs you've come across something that looks a bit like that, which is essentially a really cheap, short Allen key, which is the right size for the screws that they give you, so you can wind them in, tighten everything up and put the furniture together, which is fine if you've only got a few to do. But some of the pieces of furniture have got dozens of these, and after a few, your fingers go red raw and you start losing the will to live. Now, if you've got a set like this, then you'll be able to find a head that's very similar, and you can put it into your drill driver, and rather than doing it by hand, you're suddenly speeding everything up without actually ruining your fingers. But most people don't have a set like this, but everyone does have a key that comes with the piece of furniture. So the trick is to be able to use this in here. This is a really rough hack, but it does work. Simply cut off the end of the free Allen key that comes with the kit with a hacksaw, then tighten it into the chuck of your drill the best you can. And although it won't sit perfectly straight or be able to take vast amounts of torque, it will speed up your assembly and save your fingers. So here's a little tip I picked up when I was doing some surveying for the tunnelling industry. I've got a plumb bob here, and the scenario is it's outside and it's being affected by the weather, therefore my fan. And because of that, It's wandering all over the place and it's almost impossible to stop. The wind is blowing, you're trying to plumb something from the first floor. You can't use a laser because you can't see it outside. So you've got a conundrum on how to move forward. You try your best to try to work out exactly where it is, but it's all a bit of a guess. And the solution is very easy. All you need to do is get a bucket of water. I've got a pot here of water, and in the industry we used to use oil, and just pop your plumb bob in the water. And what you find is the main body of the plumb bob settles down very quickly for two reasons. First of all, it's now out of the wind because it's sitting in water. And secondly, because the water has a thickness to it, it's got a viscosity, it damps any movement in any direction. So you find things settle down very quickly. The string is still affected by the wind, so there may be a very small little bit of movement, but the main weight at the bottom settles down really nicely, and before you know it, you end up with a plumb bob you can use. This next one is aimed at newer DIYers, but something that I've used many times. Now, to get a perfectly square cut around a pipe, use a piece of paper or something flexible with a dead straight edge on it and wrap it around the pipe. And what you find is once the ends meet up exactly, the edge of the paper is perfectly square to the pipe. So you can then use this edge to mark around the pipe, and then following that you can cut it, and the cut will be exactly at right angles to the pipe. Quite often in DIY there'll be a requirement to drill a hole absolutely perpendicular to the face of something, like a piece of timber like this, or it could be the wall of your house, and you don't want to be off in any particular direction. Now there's two ways of doing this. There's the quick way, and then there's a way that I like the most. Here is the quick way. All you need to do is get yourself a couple of little bits of timber and just make sure one has got a nice square cut, and then it doesn't take a few seconds. So I'm just going to position my brad bit onto the timber, and then with these two bits of timber, because this has got a nice square edge, I can line it up both in this direction and this direction and drill a nice square hole. Then you can continue if you want to without ruining your workbench. And there's another way of doing this. It takes a bit longer to set up, but once you have got it set up, you can use it literally forever. I showed it to you at this very bench a few years ago. Start by clamping a larger size bit in a vise and using a spirit level, adjust it until it's absolutely vertical. Now fix your drill to it and tighten the chuck, being careful not to move the bit. Then using a small circular level bubble, you can find these on my Amazon storefront. I'll put a link in the description below. Super glue this to the top of your drill and then just adjust it to make sure that the bubble is centered. Now you can easily see when your drill is drilling absolutely vertical. And there it is, still on my drill 3 years later and still working well. The advantage of having it on your drill does mean that you've got it with you all the time. You don't have to mess around with bits of wood. The other common way of drilling is absolutely horizontally, and in the same way you can always glue a normal level bubble to your drill to make sure that you're drilling horizontally. In fact, I used to have a Ryobi that came with a bubble in it, but these days they just don't seem to produce them. Don't know why. So a bonus tip, do you know how to check a spirit level? Get 2 fixed points, put the spirit level on it, have a look to see where the bubble is, then turn it around, put it on the same 2 fixed points and have a look at the bubble. It should be in exactly the same position. These 2 points don't have to be level, they can be a little bit off, but the bubble should be in the same position irrespective of which way round it's sitting on those points. Anyway, this is a scenario, very common scenario actually. I'm going to tile my bathroom. I'm going to tile it all the way around. So I want a level datum on the wall all the way around the room. Now the easiest way of doing that is with a laser level. It's accurate, it's quick. Now most people don't have a laser level. So today we're going to use a spirit level. And the traditional way of doing it is putting it on the wall, making a mark, putting it on the wall again, making a mark. So let's just, I'll see how many spirit levels we need to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's 13 spirit levels to get most of the way around my bathroom. Now the problem with that is that if there's a slight error in the spirit level, let's say 1 millimetre per 2 foot of spirit level. By the time I get back to here, I'm now 13 millimeters out. And if I go around all the room, I'll end up with 2 lines that end up not joining, which is not good. But there's a really easy way of getting around it, and it's just so simple and something you should think about using just to cancel out your errors. And it goes like this. The first time you put your spirit level up, you mark at this point. Then you swap it over and you mark again. Then you swap it around. And what that does is that if this is a millimetre low, then the next time I turn it around, it'll be a millimetre up and go back to the same place. So you're cancelling out the errors. And hopefully, as you get around the room, those 2 lines will meet and you'll end up with tiles that aren't all wonky. Now, next one, let's have a look at painting windows. So these are my UPVC windows, which obviously I don't need to paint, but I'm just using this as an example because even recently I had to paint a set of timber windows like this. And what I like to do is to make sure that I get the paint all the way around the window frame and the bead, and then a few millimeters onto the glass. And the way I do that is with masking tape. And for years and years, what I've done is masked up just a few millimeters onto the glass. So it covers that. And the way I'll do it is to put one in each direction. And the way I've always tidied this up is by trying to trim along that line, like that. Even there, I've not quite made it properly. And in this direction as well. And it never comes out quite perfect, because it really does depend how close you are. And you end up with this sort of thing, which is probably, you know, it's okay, but it's not perfect. And I found out recently there's a better way of doing it. Let me just set that up again. And these tips and tricks are so obvious once you know them. It makes you wonder why I've spent all this time doing it a different way. And all I'm going to do is to cut from this corner to this corner. I just put my knife right in the corner there, which I can feel, then I just cut. So now I can take this section away and I'm left with this. And I can take this section away. And I now have an absolutely perfect mitered joint there that I don't have to worry about. And now I can paint over the bead, over the glass, and get a really nice finish on those corners. And lastly, a couple of measuring and marking ones just to finish off. Now, rather than pulling out your tape and marking the distance you want, have you ever considered doing it the other way round? It can be a lot easier, especially if you're upside down or in a really awkward position. I'll show you what I mean. Now, for whatever reason, I'm based at one end of the piece, but I want to do a measurement at the other end. This reminds me of when I was working on my fence the other day and I just couldn't get down low enough, because it's really difficult to mark unless you're actually in line. So just turn the tape measure round. I want 1/2 metre. I'll put 1/2 metre here, and with a nice sharp pencil, just put a mark. It's a really quick way of marking a number of lines. And I'm actually concentrating at this end of the tape rather than the other end. So the other end could be in bushes, or it could be up in the loft or 101 other places. And lastly, have you ever wanted to draw a circle, but you haven't got a compass, or you haven't got a compass big enough, but you do have a clamp? Well, have a look at this. So here we are. We want a circle of, let's say, 140 millimeters. We don't have a compass, but we do have a clamp. Right, you can actually hook your clamp onto something like a pin in the middle and adjust it so you can draw a perfect circle of just about any radius, as long as I've got a clamp big enough. I've not used this method before, but just like all the other tips and tricks, maybe one day I'll need to. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will see you next time.